Because it is no longer good enough to just provide a well designed website, we must also provide a website that is built to comply with existing laws and accessibility standards. So today we're introducing a new Chrome extension, Web Access Pro, that is meant to help designers identify and fix accessibility errors on websites. And what the Chrome extension does is it's able to analyze a page and identify for you where the errors are. And when you look at the detailed view of the error, you're able to identify whether it's a minor error or a more serious or critical error. And then it tells you what the error is so that you can start modifying the code so that you can fix it and remove that error from your site. Access Pro works, and we've installed the extension into Chrome, and the toggle is at the lower right. When you click on this, it will go ahead and scan the website for accessibility. And you can see the scanning process is very fast. And what you'll see is the panel will open up to the left that has different options, and it will automatically open to the summary page that gives you a summary of the different issues that have to do with accessibility on this site. And currently we have close to 400 errors that are issues with accessibility on this website, but there are also over 1,000 features, which means things that are being done right on this site. And largely the main errors with the site have to do with color contrast and what's called a duplicate ID. So if you're familiar with HTML code, ID attributes are typically used on an item that's unique on a web page, and if it's being used more than once, then typically you would rather want to use a class attribute instead. So when you're using ID attributes but putting them on more than one element, then that tends to be flagged as an accessibility issue. And some of the other things that are being flagged, so if we click on one of these items, it's going to give us a detail view. So it's going to move to the detail view. And if we wanted to kind of jump ahead and take a look, if you weren't sure what the meta viewport is, you can click on that. It's going to automatically scroll to that issue. And so meta viewport is a critical error in that the person who's at the site is unable to zoom the site to how they wish to see the text. So if the text is too small or the other elements on the site are too small, they are being blocked from zooming, and this is a big accessibility issue. So if we go ahead and start from the top and take a look at what are the things being seen, we see that Web Access Pro can look at ARIA issues. So ARIA is a part of the Web Accessibility Initiative, and it's meant to give people more information about something that's unclear. So in this case, the OWL, previous, and next have to do with code that I added that have to do with this carousel. And so these arrows, the previous arrow, and you can see it'll flag that element, so it's easy to see what code is being flagged. And the next arrow are not given the right role in our code, so we have to fix that. And then other issues are the buttons aren't being labeled properly, and so that's an issue. And then a big issue on this side is color contrast. So the red on the white doesn't have sufficient contrast, but more importantly, the gray on the white doesn't have sufficient contrast, and that's the primary text on this site, is that there's a lot of instances of light gray on white, and that would be very difficult for someone with low vision to discern on this website, so it would be hard for them to read the text. And we see some of the elements are behind the panel, and other elements are not. And so you can see, again, it's pretty easy to see what element is the issue because automatically you'll have that element highlighted for you. So it would be easy for you to go back to your code to figure out that this is the element you need to adjust. So these all have to do with color contrast. And if we go down further to look at some of the other things that were picked up by the scanner, we see another issue is proper ARIA landmarks. So basically, we need to do a better job delineating the different sections of our site and letting people know what they are. And if the reference section just lets you know that if you don't understand why something is being flagged, under the detail view, you can always get information on that. So if you're not really sure about ARIA, you can click the I button and it's going to bring up a reference, and then you can read about ARIA roles and how you're supposed to use them properly. So in this way, you can educate yourself about accessibility as well. So the more you use the extension, the more you start learning about what's important. So again, if we weren't really clear on what this is flagging, then you can read more about how buttons need discernible text, and it's going to give you information on, well, what is the code that you need to add to make this better. So you can see that I mentioned ARIA labels. So you basically, our buttons need ARIA labels that tell the person where they're being sent. You know, what is this button for? So we need to be clear about that. And then structure will basically point out to you the structure of the website, which is sometimes useful to know, like what, you know, which section are we in? Are we in a footer? What's in our header? And then color contrast is considered a fairly serious error, so it's been pulled out. And it's also a very common error with many sites. And this is something that can be, if you understand that color contrast is an issue, when you're choosing your colors for your website, you can keep this in mind and choose colors that have adequate contrast from the get-go. But if you're not cognizant of this issue and you're just choosing colors for their aesthetic value, then you may find instances where the colors you're choosing are just not going to work for someone with a disability, especially those with low vision. So this is basically flagging all the elements that we kind of looked at before that have too low color contrast that need to be fixed. And it tells you right here, so you can see that it has insufficient color contrast of 2.43, and we want at least a ratio of 4.5 to 1. And the current color is A6, 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 and that's a type of gray, and it's on a background color of FFFFFF, which is a background color of white. And that isn't enough. So we need to pick a darker gray in order to get adequate color contrast for this website. And then another feature of Web Access Pro is that you can disable the CSS. So let's see, if we go to a page, this is in one of the work pages, you can see without the CSS, this is what the HTML would look like without any styling applied. So you can see that we've created a list, unordered list, really, to put our pictures in, and an unordered list without any additional styling will always have the default dot. And again, you can see our navigation is again also an unordered list. It's a nested list. You have lists within lists, and our text is just picking up one of the system fonts as opposed to the Helvetica that we want to use on our site. So this is without any of the CSS applied, and so we see that our images aren't really appropriately displaying, and we don't have any styling. But if we turn the CSS back on and apply the styling, then we see that, for example, our navigation is a list, but we've told it not to display those dots in front of an unordered list, and same with our images don't have that anymore. And they're placed in a specific position on the page, and they're properly aligned, and then these thumbnail images are displaying with margin around them so that they're not close together as they were without the styling. And then we have some differences in how we're displaying the text. We have some italicized text, we have some bolder text, and that wasn't apparent when we turned off the styling. And we have the ability to toggle this button to show more text. So that's how the disabled CSS works on Web Access Pro. I'll show you a little bit of the dashboard that you might see. So when you are using Web Access Pro, you have the option to scan a site, or you have the option to go to your dashboard. And the dashboard is like a control system for the extension, where you can see receipts of your transactions. You can also look at what you've scanned in the past. So it keeps an ongoing record of the different sites that you've scanned, so that if you want to go back to a site, you can go to that site to do another scan or assessment. Let's say you've remediated the site and you want to check it and see how it's doing. And so if we hit that button, then we'll be taken to the site, and then we can scan it again. So this is actually the Web Access Pro .design website, and we tried hard to make the site accessible, and you can see we have mostly just features and no errors. And just to go over the features section that we didn't really do with the last website, the features will basically tell you where you're going, where you're doing the right thing with accessibility. So you can see that in the site the ARIA roles and are being done properly. We've adjusted our color contrast on this site so that it passes. We aren't using duplicate IDs, we're using unique IDs. We don't have empty headings, we have the proper heading order. We're declaring our language on our site, and we have appropriate alt text, and we're using proper landmarks. Our meta viewport is okay, and we are adding scrollable regions, focusable regions, so that if somebody's doing access to the site on keyboard, they will find that they can access. So that is an example of a site that's doing things correctly, and it will be pointed out in the features section. And again, here no color contrast issues are found. So that's a nice feature to kind of keep a track of what you're scanning, so that if you want to go, if you're trying to fix a site, you can always easily go back to it. It'll remember where you were. Under transactions, you will see any purchases that you've made. You'll be able to download your receipt, and then you can basically adjust your password here if you like. And then in pricing, you can adjust which plan that you're going to choose, and they will explain how it's charged and whether there's a free trial. And then if you ever need to reinstall, you can go back to the Chrome Web Store, and it'll direct you to the Chrome Web Store, where you will actually get the extension from the Chrome Web Store. And while this says Microsoft Edge, it actually takes you to the Chrome Web Store as well. It is a future intention to support other browsers. I started with Chrome, but we would like to add all the other major browsers that people use, so that they aren't, I know that not everybody uses Chrome, but so we would like to be able to use whatever browser that we like to use for our coding. And so it is a future goal to support more browsers than just Chrome. And then it'll always tell you at the bottom whether you have an active plan or not. This is an administrative account, so that it's saying there's no active plan, but it's still functioning. But if you had no active plan, then you would be blocked from continuing to scan until you choose a plan and pay for that plan. And then we've also had a feature to change it to dark mode. A lot of people prefer a dark look when they're working, and so a dark mode does exist for the dashboard. The YouTube channel, there's a series of videos. I showed you the scan of Studio A prior to us going into the code and trying to fix the site. And in those videos, I show you step by step on how I went about to try to make the site more accessible. And this is the end result. This is how the site is at this point. You can see that the gray has been changed to something darker, and this has been changed as well to make it more accessible. We now have close to 1,800 features on the site of things that we're doing right. So you can take a look at that. We've fixed the meta viewport issue. We've fixed, simple things like language. And we do still have this issue of the duplicate IDs. And I do go into more detail on why we had difficulty fixing this issue. But basically, there's a JavaScript that causes the functionality where thumbnail images will come up on the side here when you hover on this site. I think it's not working right now because of the Web Access Pro. So as you hover, a thumbnail image will come up, and this is governed by a JavaScript. And that JavaScript, when I tried to change it to class attributes as opposed to ID attributes, the whole thing broke. And so I'm still working on fixing this issue, and I will be working on a fix that I thought of doing recently to try to adjust this last item that's an issue. And you can see that other than the duplicate ID, we've fixed a lot of the things that were wrong, and so we no longer have contrast issues. So you can see how working with Web Access Pro, I was able to identify one by one everything that was a problem, and then fix each problem systematically. It took me about 5 days, and now the site is in much better shape in terms of accessibility, and we ought to be able to fix this final issue upcoming. And one of the other things we added to our site was a privacy policy, which is now required as a result of GPDR and CCPA laws that weren't in existence when the site was first coded. So that is something to be aware of as another issue with compliance other than accessibility. When you use Web Access Pro, it will give you unlimited pages to analyze so that you don't have to have limitations like other extensions that may only let you scan the home page and not other pages on the site. Once you use Web Access Pro, you can install it, and it can be used on whatever web page you load to analyze that page for accessibility errors. Presented by Designers Learn Code.